I'm very excited to be here tonight.
Well, and this is something that we have touched upon a little bit over the years. The fact that the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's, all of the stuff that happens around this time of year, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, they all have their own unique legends, their own unique mythologies. And I know a lot of it has kind of been bastardized and conglomerated over the years, but what is it about this season that makes people feel like they need these stories to get through?
Well, it tends to be a couple of different things are going on. You've got it's kind of the year's coming to a close, and you've got the solstice coming, the winter solstice. So the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and that has the whole folklore and mythology all around that. In fact, Christmas was put there by the Christians to give some kind of a Christian celebration at the same time the pagans were doing their solstice thing, so that was very deliberately put at the same time of year because they were already very conscious of the sun's going away. We wanted to come back. We were going to do all kinds of celebrations to try and bring the sun back. Some of the most ancient ones were just, pounding on pots and pans and different things, making noises, doing, whatever kind of sacrifices you needed to do to bring
whatever
the sun
works.
back.
Yeah, sure.
So I think Hanukkah is here just because it's kind of coincidental, but it's also kind of cool. It's just they had their miracle this time of year, and they've been celebrating it ever since. It's not one of their major holidays, but with Christmas being such a major Christian holiday, I think that has brought Hanukkah forward. And of course, Kwanzaa is just a brand new holiday. That's been created at the same time, just a good time to get together with family and celebrate African American traditions. And so that's very new.
But even being a new holiday, I mean, they've already started inserting their own stories, their own legends, and it seems like a lot of the times, different religions will co-opt some of the ideas. Even some of the modern things, like I think it's only been like really the last decade that I've heard of Elf on a Shelf. But that's become a big part of everybody's
Yes.
Christmas. And now, the Jews, we all have, and I say we because I am half Jewish, but, now they've got the mensch on the bench. It seems like if there's...
Why not?
Sure, if there's one thing that somebody has, then another... like I never heard when I was growing up, I never heard of a Hanukkah bush. But now it's a thing for some people because they want to kind of co-opt the Christmas tree idea.
Yeah. And a friend of mine who's Jewish had just on Facebook shared... with that group, can't remember the name of it, something the Maccadeans, but they had just done a wonderful song called "It's All About the Nez," which was all about the miracle, and it was just probably one of the best songs I ever saw. I actually, if I'd had a moment, which I haven't yet, but I want to put it in the Hanukkah section of my website because it's just a great video. It was wonderful explaining the story, and it was hilarious. I was like, this is so great. So, I love it when this kind of thing, there's so much musical tradition around Christmas, and seeing a lot of this wonderful music now carrying over into some of the other religious celebrations at this time of year is just, it's delightful to me. I just love it. I want to be able to share that song out with, all of my Jewish audience who's coming in to read the Hanukkah stories, and yeah, it's really cool.
What I've always liked about some of the stories too is that a lot of times when we have these tales that we tell, we will have morals behind them. And of course, a lot of these Christmas stories, especially, they have a moral behind them. But some of them just exist to further enhance the spirit of the season and the spirit of giving. So it's not necessarily about learning a lesson as much as it is about just learning to love one another and learning to give.
I can't think of a better lesson, though.
Right.
That's I think you summed up two of the big important lessons in this life.
Well, and I say that every year. It's not about what you get. It's about what you give and how much you give. And I only say that because I get really cheap presents for everybody. So when I go to the dollar store and everybody gets, a pot holder or a grill lighter, just understand it was the spirit of which it was given.
You know what I started doing a few years ago? Not all the time, but I actually sit down and I do cards for birthdays and Christmas, and not just like the Christmas cards, but I actually write cards for my family, and I do it to put with their presents, and I actually make the card the gift. So instead of just signing it, I actually write inside the card just the different things that I've really noticed and appreciated about the family member in the past few weeks or months. So it's very relevant and very current. And just the things that, when I see them, it just makes me catch my breath and think, wow, I'm related to this person. That's amazing. Just wanted to make the card the gift. So even though they got a present, a lot of times I notice that they keep the card, even if they long past forgot even what present the card came with. So I've started doing that as a personal tradition, just making the card the gift.
Well, it is a very sentimental season. I mean, and it really is about, how we connect with one another. And I guess if you want to go back to the idea of Christmas and the whole reason it exists being the birth of Jesus, that's one of the lessons that he would have wanted us to carry forward, is that we need to learn to love one another and to always have a place in our heart for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's too easy to always remember, the stuff that's annoying you in that particular time period and talk about it. So it's one of the reasons why, whenever we have the different celebrations that are out there that remind us, no, wait a minute, talk to people about the great stuff and appreciate who they are. That's really cool. That's having a whole time of year where everybody's kind of rallying around that theme is, I almost just don't think we can do that enough.
I also like, too, that with a lot of these stories that we tell around this time, and especially when you're dealing with a lot of the Santa Claus legends and of similar type figures, they seem to always have a place in the modern world. Even if it's an old world legend, it always seems to find a way to still be part of our collective fabric, even now in the modern age.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, some of the legends that come down now, I mean, one of my favorites is from New York City, and it's like so old, but it's like the Santa Claus legend, made real. It's that the story's called A Gift from St. Nicholas, and it was just the typical. The family started off rich. The guy won the heart of his wife, and the Burgermeister lost her, and so the Burgermeister basically set out to ruin this shoemaker, and so they are literally at their last meal on Christmas Eve, and the guy's name's Klaus, and he's looking in for his only last treasure that he has, which I believe it was a pipe that had been given to him in a stocking, and he was absolutely sure it had come from St. Nicholas. It was like too expensive, totally something that his parents couldn't have afforded, and he'd been keeping it since he was a little boy. And he's like, okay, well, I have to feed my family. I'm going to have to sell this. And as he's taking out his final prized possession, there's a knock on the door. And this jolly man comes in and says, hi, I've come to spend the evening with you guys, And I mean, he is like the perfect St. Nicholas character. And, he's like, well, I'll sit by the fire and I'll warm myself, and why don't we have some food? And they're like, we don't have any food left, literally. I'm about to sell my last possession. And he says, well, I smell a goose cooking. And they open the cupboard, and there's like this whole Christmas feast in there, and it was totally a miracle. So they feast, and at midnight, he's like, well, I've got to go. And so he kind of jumps up, and the family swore that he went up the chimney. All the women thought he went up the chimney. All the boys and the dad thought he kicked up some dust and ash in the fireplace and then escaped out the door. But the next morning, when they checked the fireplace, they found a big bag of silver coins, and they heard a clamor outside. And when they went outside, their house had gone from a hovel to this fancy brick mansion. It was called the Brick House for many, many years, and this was the story associated with it that was there in New Amsterdam until the British took over and raised the block and put their own stuff in there. But that was always, that house was attributed to being transformed by St. Nicholas, and they felt that he had blessed Klaus and his family so much that they made him the alderman for their village, which was like the head man of the village at the time. So it was just great, and it's just the kind of thing I could totally picture it as a film, Well, but it's just that transformative St. Nicholas character transforming lives, and this is in it's a Dutch story from New Amsterdam before it was even New York, so pretty cool.
You mentioned, picturing it as a film, and the idea of St. Nicholas or Santa Claus coming to visit, and especially coming to visit when not on his rounds necessarily, coming to people before he's actually out delivering all the toys. That's a pretty common, I guess, a modern legend. We have Miracle on 34th Street. We have Santa Claus the movie, even Ernest Saves Christmas. These type of more modern tellings of Santa Claus, they always seem to involve him getting involved in our everyday world, and that helping people to learn the meaning of Christmas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that whole idea of if you've heard of the phrase angels unaware, where you're entertaining angels unaware, it's the same idea, he's a saint. I mean, literally everybody talks about Santa Claus, but the origins of him is Saint Nicholas, who was a man who was devoting his life towards, helping other people. And so that idea of, entertaining a saint unawares is the same thing. And in this case, it's a saint who gives gifts.
And of course, the Santa Claus legend being predominant in Christmas legend and lore, but there's one that has taken on a new life of its own in recent years, and that's Krampus. Krampus is definitely making a comeback. And I think part of it is that episode of American Dad, pushing it too. But guys like Jeff Belanger, who have been out there sharing this legend, it's worked its way back in, and everything old becomes new again eventually.
And Belschnickel.
Oh, we'll definitely be talking about that.
Yes,
too.
That's the one that I'm familiar with very. But I think I'm like maybe 1/32 Dutch. But that allows us to celebrate Saint Nicholas Day and Der Beltsnickel, and that one I love that story because it's like the story is that Saint Nicholas on the day before his birthday that is celebrated on, I believe it's December 6th. So December 5th, he pulls together and chains the devil up and says, okay, you're the one who has to go around and find out if all of the little Dutch kids have been naughty or nice. And if they've been good and they can recite their lessons and they, know their scripture passages, then St. Nicholas will come on his birthday and put gifts in their shoes. And if they haven't been, they're going to get coal. So that's right there is your coal versus gift tradition. But it was on St. Nicholas Day. And one of my favorite stories that has been passed down in Maryland was a family actually would see their uncle would dress up as Der Beltsnickel, and he'd come in the house and he'd be all scrungy looking and covered in coal dust and everything, and the kids would shriek and they'd half believe he was really there, and he'd make them line up and he'd quiz them almost like a quiz, like a teacher. Can you quote this scripture, can you say this mathematical problem? And he'd go up and down the line, and if they got it right, he'd be all mad because that meant St. Nicholas was going to give them a gift. And if they got it wrong, he'd wave his chains, and he'd try and scare them. And while he's doing this 12-year-old girl, who was the oldest in the family, is watching his shadow because his shadow is not doing the same thing he's doing. It's actually forming into she's actually seeing the real Der Beltsnickel showing up inside his shadow, and his shadow is starting to move in an opposite direction from him, and she actually sees it like crawl up to the roof and look at her with these golden eyes and even calls her by name. And she's so frightened, she actually faints. And her family, when they wake her up, they send the kids off to bed or to their activities, and they ask her what happened, and she said, I saw this creature calling me by name. And they said, yeah, that tends to happen in our family, right, on the 12th birthday, is that, the kids see Der Beltsnickel, and they also get to see the saint. So you should be on the lookout because you may see St. Nicholas in the next 24 hours. And she couldn't sleep that night because she was so freaked out by what was happening. So she got up and looked out in the moonlight. She actually saw St. Nicholas coming door to door with his sleigh, with his pack of presents to put the presents and coins and fruit and different things in the kids' shoes. So she saw him in passing, and Der Beltsnickel was right there, and he was running in front of the sleigh, and he was all mad. She saw the real guy, the same one she'd seen in her uncle's shadow. But when she saw him, he was totally under the control of the saint. She realized she didn't actually have anything to scare. But she actually got to see the true St. Nicholas that night, and I love that story. I thought that was really cool.
Well, and when you have a story like that is something that is particular to a culture, particular to a certain segment of people, but it becomes something that can be universal. And we see that a lot in paranormal research and in some of the ghost stories that we have. There's a lot of stories that may seem very provincial and very segmented toward a specific portion of the population, but they have universal themes. And
absolutely. One of the Hanukkah stories that I have on the website is actually one of those universal themes, and the story is very modern. It was one of the guys who was over, I'm not sure which of the more current wars he was in, but it was something like the Gulf War. So it was within the last 15, 20 years, and he was killed in the war. But it was he was killed, and the night he was killed, what happened to be Hanukkah, one of the days of Hanukkah, and so his parents didn't know he died, and he appeared to his mom, and he sat on the side of the bed and said, "Happy Hanukkah, Mom. I want you to know I'm all right." And, she thought he'd just been, he'd been let out early, and this was a surprise visit, and that he was home. And then they got the telegram the next day that said, or the visit from the authorities saying, "I'm sorry, your son was killed in action." And so he came home for Hanukkah to tell his parents specifically that, yeah, his body was dead, but he was still okay. And I thought it was very moving, because you hear that a lot of people who have just lost someone, and they don't always know, but they meet them after they've died. Just that one time, just so that they know, yeah, I'm okay. Just because my body's not here anymore doesn't mean that I'm not still the person that you knew and loved in life, and that everything's going to be fine, and that we'll be together again someday. That's another part of that theme that comes out a lot.
That actually happened to me.
Did it?
Yes. 2001, my mother died of a particular type of cancer, and I was there when she physically died. I got home and had a couple of friends meet me on my porch to extend sympathies. And my phone rang, and it had a weird, the best way I can describe it is an unusual type of ID on it that didn't make any sense. I answered the phone, and my friend's standing right there, and I heard my mother's voice saying, "I'm okay, Mac." And then the phone call ended.
Wow. That has to be, oh my gosh. You've made me cry.
I'm sorry.
That's amazing. That's amazing that she reached out to you like that.
And the two people that were right there definitely heard her, and one of them was a long-standing friend of over 30 years who definitely knew her voice, and even he said that was her.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's probably the best gift that you can get, is to know that your loved ones are still around you. And Stephanie, you being, a medium, you know that people are all around us all the time, but sometimes people need to have that direct connection for themselves, and the holidays, of course, are probably a great time for people to reach out and do so.
It does, and I think, like, in Matt's case, especially where you're surrounded by the paranormal, something simple, like a simple message from her, you might have blown off, or just thought like, oh, it could have been anything. But her way of knowing to have such a direct message to you and in such a direct way, I think touched home with you a little bit more. I think they do that with skeptics too. It happens a lot.
Sure, yeah.
But what I found really interesting is she didn't use my given name of Matthew. She called me Mac, and that's what she had been known to do.
Right. She was just definitely trying to get it across to you that it's definitely with her.
There's no if and or but. This is who this is.
Right. And also do it in a loving way too.
Yeah.
For someone like you, a butterfly wouldn't have cut it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you needed that, and the method that she used too was the method that was the one that would get it across to you,
right? So
you would know there was no doubt that this is your mom.
Yeah, as a scientist, I'm trained to look at things very objectively and this and that. This wasn't oh, I heard the voice, or I thought I dreamt her. This was a physical device doing a physical thing, which I know as a scientist, this requires energy, and this is, there's something that has to happen in order to make the phone ring and
but
make
not
noise.
Even as a scientist, being surrounded by the paranormal, you're used to walking into a place and hearing footsteps or hearing disembodied voices, and that's nothing new to you, so you wouldn't bat an eye at that. So, calling you by your nickname and calling your cell phone and hearing her voice after she passed, that's a direct way. Even if you didn't have a degree in science, it still makes you stop and wonder. And
it got
really,
my undivided attention. Yeah.
Well, and we have a lot of those stories, Sandy, in throughout history of. It's different, of course, when you're dealing with the spirit of somebody who was a direct loved one, but ghost stories in general are a big part of Christmas tales, and there's some on your website, but also Dickens, of course, being probably one of the most famous Christmas ghost stories. It seems like people really want to have that connection to their loved ones at the holidays.
Absolutely.
The ones who have passed, I mean.
Absolutely. One of the ones that I liked the best, I just called it Haunted Christmas because, it was a Wisconsin story about a man who was coming home from midnight mass. And he was, like you were just saying before, like Stephanie was saying, he was hearing these footsteps behind him. And it's like the snow is raining down on him, but he's not getting wet. His coat is staying completely dry. And he's like in this bubble as he's going home. And then as he mounts his steps, the footsteps just disappear. And he looks behind him, wondering if somebody turned off on a side street. And he only sees one set of footprints, but he feels this breeze, like, go past him as if it went right through the door. And he was, like, totally freaked out. But like Dickens' character, he walked in, and then he saw a firelight, and a friend came flying out of his, I guess, his study or one of his rooms that he was a bachelor, so he had a housekeeper who was asleep, and then this study or his main living room. His friend had apparently come in while he was out and built a fire and was waiting for him, and so he forgot all about the footsteps and went, and they had this wonderful time. They talked and talked. His friend looked a little ill, but was and stayed huddled by the fire, but they were so glad to see each other, hadn't seen each other in years. And he even went down to the kitchen and brought up a full meal for them, and they're eating and they're drinking, and then he shows his friend to one of the guest rooms that was just down the hall from that room. And the next morning when he woke up, his friend wasn't in the room, the bed hadn't been slept in, the meal was still, his plate was empty, but his friend's plate that he'd been eating off of, supposedly, was sitting right by the fire, the empty, the blackened fireplace, and it was still full of food. And he got a telegram, I'm not sure if it was Christmas Day or the day after, saying that his friend had passed away on Christmas Eve. So his friend had actually, not only like a phone call, had actually appeared to him, and he had been, if not physically present, he actually got to see, his friend for one last long conversation. It was just, I love that story, and it's very powerful. It was a true story of a little bit older. I believe it was not horse and carriage days and like Model T Ford days, and that one's been around for a long time. And I've always found that moving. Although probably I think I liked your cell phone story even better. Maybe because it's modern and it's something that just, I don't know, that really touched me.
It touched me too.
As someone who's not easily...
That's what it's supposed to do. That was why she called.
Well, in a lot of these tales that we hear and that we share, the idea behind them, the basis for them, is love, and that's what we're trying to push. That's the feeling and the emotion that we want everybody to share this time of year. There are some stories that we tell, though, that are designed to instill, I don't want to say fear necessarily, but of course, we tell the story that if you misbehave, Santa Claus is going to put coal in your stocking. So there is some degree of a lesson to be learned. Is a lot of that, do you think, because this is the time of year when we get ready to reflect upon the year past and think about the things that we did wrong and think about the things we want to do right going forward?
I don't know. It also could be against greed.
That's true, too.
If anybody's been a parent of a kid who's just, or, a niece or a nephew who's walked into a toy store at a certain age and is like, I want.
Or every toy commercial that comes on after Halloween. Yeah. That's going on the list. Oh, I didn't know that exists. That's going on the list.
How about that big book of
toys?
toys?
I can see the temptation where you might say, you better be good if we're going to get you all this stuff.
Stephanie brought up a good point. Toys R Us starts putting out that big book of toys, and then it's just over.
And they give you the stickers, so you can stick them on the toys that you want. So it just makes it so convenient.
You might as well
parents.
just send it back to them with your credit card and say one of everything.
Exactly, one of everything. You put the whole truck and back it into the thing. Yeah, it's. I just remember that phase and just how I was so glad when they got past that. And yeah, they still appreciate getting stuff, but they also really are beginning to understand now. All my nieces and nephews are old enough to begin to get that Christmas is a little bit more than just, opening all the presents under the tree, and that there's more meaning to it than that. But that's, my theory has always been Some poor parent was like, it's not all about that. If you're going to do this, you better be good.
Well, I wonder if it wasn't just from like some cheap parent or somebody who didn't want to go out and actually spend the money on anything, saying like, no, you've been naughty, so you get coal. You know, like it was really just the ingenious way of one parent getting out of something, and it helped to inspire, you know, millions of kids for generations after that. And also, you know, the way that you know, we're lucky a little bit this year because fuel prices have gone down, but there are some years that I might have actually wanted to be bad in order to get that coal so I could stay warm for the rest of the winter. You know that I can't.
Yeah, it's not necessarily always a bad thing.
Right, I can't heat my house with a He-Man figure.
Not for long.
But
yeah, that would be a very short fire, wouldn't it?
well, you mentioned though that your family is of an age where they're learning that it's not all about what you get and all about what the gifts are, and we think that, you know, for a lot of younger kids especially, you know, they're kind of wrapped up in that idea. They're wrapped up in the idea of what Santa Claus is going to bring. But when you think about it, when you get ready for Christmas, when you hear that song that makes you know that it's Christmas time, when you see that television special that makes you feel that it's Christmas time, the feeling that you get, it isn't immediately about what gift you're going to receive. It's always about whatever you feel in your heart or whatever you feel emotionally attached to the season. And I think that that's what a lot of these stories that we share are designed to play upon as well. They're designed to open up that door of our heart that's open up for, you know, maybe a month out of the year.
Yeah, when I was really little, I always just thought it was magic. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, the toys were great, but the feeling was always like it's just like magic. It's that Grinch moment, you know, when he suddenly brings everything back and it's there. It was just like I always thought it was like magic. And I remember when suddenly Santa wasn't real and I finally got it. It was like magic went out of Christmas, and you know, that was so disappointing to me. And it's funny as an adult, and it's only been the last couple of years, I suddenly realized, wow, that feeling that I had when I was a little kid's come back. You know, not just for Christmas, but for all of life. You know, I'm like, oh wow, there's so much behind this. You know, we were just talking about the science aspect of things, and there's so much that we can't measure as scientists yet, because so much of what, even, you know, the love you feel for your family can't really be measured on a scientific device.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we're not there. You know, maybe in the far, far future, but right now we're just not there. We can measure energy, but we can't say what it means and what it means inside the person's head, where we're measuring all the sparkles that are going off in their brain. So, you know, I realize it's like, it's not just that every day is a gift. It's so cliche, but it's so true. But that, you know, seeing the miracle in just all of the things that are around you. It's the world seems to be, to me, full of magic these days, even if it's not the sword and sorcery kind. And I'm so glad that I got that feeling back. You know, it's not there every day, but you know, I tend to see the center of the universe as a fountain of joy. That joy is just bursting out if you can, like, reach down and find it in yourself. And I think part of the Christmas is about finding that joy.
Well,
that joy that maybe that was the Big Bang, was that first moment when, you know, we coalesced and said, wow, here I am. Look, I'm alive. This is amazing. You know?
And I think that that's part of what a lot of people gravitate toward is even as much as life can get you down, and even as much as you know, you can get kicked in the stomach all year long, there's this one period of time that's reserved for all that stuff to go out the window. And of course, there's all the different stresses that are associated with the holidays themselves, and there's a reason why people, you know, get depressed at this time of year. But in general, we have it kind of reserved in our mental calendars as this is the time when we have to let a lot of the things go, you know, goodwill toward men. And I think we're able to compartmentalize a lot of things that would benefit us more the rest of the year. I mean, I hate to be cliche and say it should be Christmas all year round, but really, it'd be a better world if it was.
Yeah.
I think it should be.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you just want me to give you a gift every time I see you.
I haven't got one yet, so. No, but
you know what?
everybody
People
gets
do give you a gift every time they see you. I mean, if you really think about it, and you take it, you know, take it out to the logical end, you know, every time that person actually sees you and smiles, that is a gift. We
That's
just don't always remember that that's a gift.
Well, that's why they call it being in their presence.
Wrapped up with a bow.
Ha 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 ha.
So
I always love that joke. I know it's corny, but it's always one of my favorites.
Christmas jokes are allowed to be corny. That's part of the
be.
charm of the season. Yeah. So when when we're collecting all of these tales over the years, there's a reason why certain ones stick out and certain ones become universal. With a lot of these themes that we're talking about, is there a particular? I mean, I assume Santa Claus being one of them, but is there a particular tradition, particular mythology associated with Christmas that you see across many cultures? I mean, it seems like they've all just been adopted from one to the other. You know, we take the German idea of the Tannenbaum, and now we have a Christmas tree. All of these different things that we've accumulated over the years have come from so many different cultures. Is it just too much of a big melting pot now?
Well, I'm glad that some people still celebrate like the 6th of or the 6th of December as St. Nicholas Day. I'm glad that even though it's in subcultures, I'm glad that's still there, that people realize that it's separate from Christmas, and that there are two different celebrations, but yeah, it has become a bit of a melting pot, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are turning back and saying, wait, we got to go back to church and do the, Christmas Eve service or the Christmas morning service and get back to the roots, because we've lost our roots in all of the melting pots, but I don't know. I think everything evolves. I think it has to, because as people grow closer together, it's not a bad thing that we're all thinking about goodness and light at this time of year. I just can't believe that that's a bad thing, even if it is a bit of a melting pot.
Well, but I think that melting pot idea, the idea of all these legends kind of amalgamating amongst each other, is kind of the idea of the spirit of Christmas, that it should be that way. We shouldn't hold on to the individual identity of what is ours, and it should be a chance for us to all share and experience and be communal as one species, as one people.
The Christmas chimera.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, that's a good one. But it's the archetype. When you get right back down to sort of the basics of things, one of the things that you can you see it in religion, you see it in folklore, you see it in a bunch of things, is that after a while you get back to that universal, which, the word I tend to use is the archetype, because it's like, it's that core. That's the truth, the hitchhiker story. There's so many variations on it, and so many stories that are like it that have been adapted from people who've had experiences that are similar. But it's all about the person who has died trying to get back home, But Christmas is the same kind of thing. It is about light coming into a dark world, and it's the same. I mean, it's interesting that the Hanukkah miracle was all about light. And Christ was called the light of the world, and it's a solstice is about, let's invite light to come back, because we're hitting the darkest part of our season and we need the light. So it's all dovetails into that light coming back in the world. It's that archetype, and so is it the melting pot, or is it all kinds of people trying to express that universal light coming into the world from their unique viewpoint? I think that's kind of important, actually, because, forgive me for going a little bit into the philosophy of things.
No, that's great. We love it.
When you think about, the concept of God, whether you believe it or not, many, many people do. I happen to be one of them. God is a huge concept that humans really can't comprehend. And when you're looking at God as that aspect of him that is this light of the world, to just come at it from one viewpoint is to not be able to comprehend the hugeness, the hugeness of this being that we call God. Whereas, you have millions of people who are believing in God and looking at him from their unique viewpoint. Suddenly you have all of these mirrors showing you a slightly different aspect of the light of the world.
And every gift,
in every culture.
Every gift that we give each other, every hug, every smile is all just furthering that light from one person to another.
Yeah, and I think that's that light, that's that fountain of joy, that's that core at the base of things. I really think that is what will bring true peace on earth. That's what transforms. But, everybody has to contribute to that transformation. And you're right, it is that cliche about Christmas every day. maybe it's not so much Christmas as reminding yourself that, am I here to promote more of the light, more of the joy, more of peace each day, or making the choice to be in that direction or to go in another direction? And in some ways, folks who seem to linger, the ones who are unhappy, and linger as ghosts, you wonder if that, it's the trauma of the situation or the fact that they can't let go of something that was so horrific to them that they can't turn and move towards the light. I don't claim to be a medium, but we have psychic abilities in my family, and I think last May, I encountered one of those situations where we walked into a house that was totally haunted, and the woman who was there couldn't let go of her anger and her pain, and she was there because she couldn't let it go, and that's why she was haunting that house. And she was a nun who lost her faith in God, and couldn't let go of the anger for whatever had caused that situation to be able to release, even when invited. Couldn't do it. Just getting her to even consider it, even a little bit, was a big step in the right direction there. And I think, that's sort of like, I don't know, in my experience has been that a lot of times with ghosts, you have people who are there to help them heal. Because they need to heal too. That's the whole going into the light concept, is that they need to be healed. And that, maybe they can't get there the very first time that they encounter someone who is a healer, but maybe they can be moved slightly in that direction. And I think that every time we celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or one of these wonderful festivals, that maybe all of us are being slightly nudged in that direction. Just like, some people can immediately go into these ghost situations and get them to go into the light and release their pain and be able to move on. But a lot of times it's a step-by-step process. It's a slight nudge here and there, both for those who are, not in the physical realm anymore but are tied here because of pain or something else, and for those of us who are still here.
Well, there's a big push in recent years, and we see it all the time on social media, where everybody's like, we have to put the Christ back in Christmas. And I think that people get too wrapped up in the figure of and what he represents as opposed to the actual message of it. And I think if we can keep thinking the same way that you're talking about, then that would be ultimately what Jesus would have wanted. Or if you don't believe in that, and that's not your cup of tea, it's it's what Santa Claus wants. It's what everything that's behind the Christmas season is about having that feeling within you and sharing it with one another. So I don't think that Christ has left Christmas at all. I think that it's just us as people turning Christmas into something that it was never intended to be, being this. And I don't want to be like Linus here and talk about the commercialization of Christmas, but it kind of has become that way. Now I need my blanket.
Well, sometimes it has, but I think as long as there are folks like you, like me, like people out there who say put the Christ back in Christmas, it's cliche. It's not quite what we're talking about here, but as long as there are people who are keeping their eye on that, I think we won't stray too far. The commercial stuff that happens in Christmas doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have that miracle feel to it that makes Christmas really real. That stuff becomes hollow. And I think as long as it does have that hollowness to it, that we'll be able to keep Christ in Christmas. We'll keep the light in Christmas, because people will get tired of the hollow feeling. That's not the feeling that transforms.
I had mentioned earlier in the show, the idea of Elf on the Shelf being a relatively new story that we tell kids and a new tradition for a lot of families. There seems to be, with Christmas, though, there's always that room for more legends and mythologies to develop around the holidays. It seems like we're willing to take those on, whereas, other holidays, other observances, we might not be so willing to. But with Christmas, we're always looking for another great Christmas story to share with each other.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. And being a storyteller and a writer, right. I always think about, what is there anything I can contribute to this, to this lore that is unique, or even if it's not unique, that's just my voice saying, I want to have something to say around this. So I totally get that. I think one of the reasons why I've been collecting some of these Christmas stories and putting them up on the site, not just because they're great folk tales, but also because, I mean, I'm adding my voice to the collection, So I've got another one that kind of follows these themes. Comes from New York. It's a New York story. Again, one of the older ones. It was back in Albany, I'd say at this point, the English are here, the British are here, but it's not pre-Revolutionary War. And so, again, it comes from the Dutch tradition, and they had a baker there who was pretty successful, and he had done all of his St. Nicholas cookies and had them out there, and a woman comes into a shop, and she asks for a dozen cookies, so he gives her a dozen cookies. And he's very thrifty, so he gives her exactly 12, and she's like, no, I want a dozen. And he's like, oh, she's one of those ones who wants the baker's dozen, that extra cookie, And he's like, nope, sorry, a dozen is 12. And she's like, I want a dozen. He's like, take it or leave it. So she walks out. And from that moment on, he starts having the worst luck in the world. And she comes back 2 more times, and every time she asks him for a real dozen, the baker's dozen, 13, he won't give it to her. And his baking is going so bad now, either the bread doesn't rise or it rises too much and it becomes like one big puff ball. Things are soggy or they're too burnt, and he's losing customers. And so he finally goes to Mass and he prays to St. Nicholas and says, St. Nicholas, I need help. I really need your help here. Please tell me what to do. This woman has cursed me. She must be a witch. We're in dire straits here. So he goes back. His shop is completely empty. He's sitting there with his head in his hands, and suddenly St. Nicholas is right there in front of him. And I mean, this isn't the, jolly Santa Claus. It was St. Nicholas in his fisher's miter, as he would have looked back in the 6th century. Real deal. And he says to this guy, he said, I spent my whole life giving money to those in need. I helped the sick. I helped the suffering. I cared for little children, just like our Lord taught us. God in his mercy has been generous to us, and we need to be generous to other people. And he can't even look at the saint. He puts his head in his hand, and he said, is an extra cookie such a terrible price to pay for the generosity God has shown to us? He asked the guy. And the guy is like, oh my gosh, I totally missed it. I totally missed that was what it was really about. And the saint was gone, and right after that, the bell jingles, and the old woman is back. And he walks right over, and he has made a batch of cookies, and it's the first batch of cookies that's been good since he started the war with the old crone. And he just takes out 13 cookies and gives her 13 cookies. And she said, all right, the spell is broken from this time onward. For you, a dozen is 13. And so at least in that bake shop and many others in the area, for years, centuries, you still can get a baker's dozen here and there. A baker's dozen has been 13 in honor of the generosity of God to us and St. Nicholas to the poor. So that's another one of my favorite stories.
And it gives
on the website.
It certainly gives meaning to it too. Working in the food industry for a long time, I always assumed that the baker's dozen was called that because one for the baker, make sure that everything came out all right. But
I'd heard that too. So hearing this version of it, I was like, wow.
I know I like your version so much better.
Yeah,
it's so much nicer.
Yeah.
Makes you less gluttonous.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's not about me shoving that 13th cookie in my face. It's about something so much more than that. Well, when you hear these stories like this, and when people keep sharing them, it shows that we want to be a better people. We want to be better, but that we understand that we're sometimes wrapped up in some of the day-to-day stuff of just being human. And obviously that baker was one of those people. He's wrapped up in just the everyday life of having to support his family and having to live within his means and having to provide. And we don't always realize that some of the little sacrifices that we can make somebody else's life so much better. And that they always say whatever you put out there, it'll come back to you, whatever, how many folds, Stephanie, you know better than I do.
Do I?
Is it twofold or fivefold or tenfold?
Three.
Whatever. Threefold.
I'm
Okay.
gonna say 3.
We'll all
Some
pick a
people
number.
say 10. It's personal preference, I guess.
Yeah, so far it hasn't really worked so much for me, but that's the idea behind it, is that if we put out more good vibes, and more good vibes will come back to us. And I'm sure a lot of the stories that you've collected over the years, not just Christmas related, but a lot of them probably have that same type of a theme.
Yeah, it's that pay it forward theme. Yeah, I've always called it pay it forward, and you try and live that way, because that's really what it is. You can't. It's like trying to pay back your parents. You ever think about that? You can't. There's no possible way you can ever pay back your parents. So what you do is you take what your parents sacrificed and gave you, and you pay it to your children. And you ask, or if you don't have your own children, you pay it back to the community or your church or your synagogue or wherever whatever community you're living in, that you have to pay it forward. And I think that's kind of a concept that comes out in folktales a lot. Is that who you are and what you are, will show itself, number one, and that the ones who are blessed are the ones who pay it forward.
And I think everybody should take these lessons away. I mean, we have a lot of that going on today, where you'll see it happens like in the drive-through line, where somebody will pay for the food of the person behind them and expect them to pay it for, and everybody keeps doing that. And it's a way to kind of keep that theory and that concept going. Some people, it just aggravates them. It aggravates me. I just want to pay for my own stuff and move on. But I understand the sentiment behind it. And that's what a lot of these stories that we share, a lot of the folklore that we still share, which you can read about on AmericanFolklore.net. But we share these tales because we want to keep remembering those lessons. We want to keep remembering the concepts behind them. The story may change in the way that it's told over the years, but the central theme always stays the same.
Yeah. Yep. And that's their power. It's one of the reasons why, people read the same books over and over again, or watch or have a favorite movie that they just always want to watch over and over again. There's something about those themes. They're those universals, those archetypes that, they cross all of the cultures. I think one of my favorite things is that when you meet like a healer or somebody like the Dalai Lama, what you see in him will be the same kind of thing that you will see in, the Pope or someone in a completely different religion, but who is, in their hearts trying to be closer and closer to the core of things.
Right.
And they all start to look alike. They
Compassion
follow totally
wears the
different
same
traditions,
face.
but they all start to look alike because they're all looking at the same central archetype, the same central God figure. And that really makes them into something amazing. But it doesn't just have to be them. It could be any of us, because the same central God figure or, universal figure, whoever you choose to be looking at, when you're looking at the core, whatever name you give him, her, it, that central figure, you all start to resemble him. It's like you always start to share the same jokes with the people that you hang out with all the time. Well, when you start hanging out with that person, you start to look like him.
Well,
and it crosses everything.
And that's what makes us all connected. Whether it doesn't matter what name you put on it, as you said, it's still the same thing that runs amongst us all. Well, we want to thank you, Sandy, for joining us. Our guest, S.E. Schlosser, Sandy, and she is the author of the Spooky series, and you can check out her website, AmericanFolklore.net. And what are some of the projects that you're working on? We got about a minute or two here. Let's let you talk to people about some of the things that you have coming down the pipeline.
Well, I just finished more spooky campfire tales, so
Nice.
that's the first sequel I've done, and that one has just come out, and it's spookier and scarier. A couple of true stories in there from my family tradition, and some of my own personal experiences are in there as well. So that one is the one that we just put up under wraps, and is the latest thing you can get off the website right now. So, and I've been traveling a lot in the Southwest. So, Grand Canyon folklore, Grand Canyon ghost stories. There's so much stuff in Arizona. So be looking for some stuff like that coming out on the website pretty quickly. And then I'm also, it's not spooky, but I'm also trying to build out the Tall Tales section, which is I haven't had a chance to do in the last few years. And so Tall Tales and Myths and Legends, I'm building that out right now.
Excellent. Well, stay tuned, everybody, to AmericanFolklore.net for all the great stories. So many there now to already read, and let's keep sharing these tales, and let's keep sharing the themes behind them. Thank you so much, Sandy, for joining us, and you have a great holiday.
Thank you. You guys as well. Take care.
You too. And that is S.E. Schlosser. You can check out all of her work on AmericanFolklore.net. We are going to take a break for the news right now. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about a number of topics. I want to get the crew's thoughts on some Christmas traditions and tradition legends as well. Maybe we all have some things that we do differently. Maybe we have some things that we do the same. We'll talk about that coming up in the next hour. We'll also get a little bit weird with the Week in Weird, and we'll take your phone calls, 508-996-0500. 877-996-1420. Those are the numbers to call in at any time during the program. And remember, you can also tweet about it on Twitter using the hashtag SpookyLive, and that's all amalgamated right there on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com as well. So stay tuned. We'll be back with more of the program coming up after the news. It's Spooky South Coast here on the new 1420 WBSM.
For local news, talk, and sports, the South Coast turns to AM 1420 WBSM New Bedford and WB.